I'm going to start with Grand Theft Auto. I'm going to start with a case that was brought concerning violent video games in the state of Illinois before then Governor Rod Blagojevich was arrested. Why was Rod Blagojevich arrested and put in jail? The story is that he was caught trying to auction off a Senate seat for somebody who allegedly had recently been elected to the office of the presidency from the state of Illinois, who was at that time serving in the United States Senate. Now, if you actually read through what is identified in the transcripts as being what he was saying and the context around which it was saying, I contend he was actually in a course of revealing something incredibly scandalous, and that he chose an approach that was exploited as part of a pre-existing paradigm where somehow somebody who was a member of the Chicago Democratic machine, as Blagojevich was before he became the governor, had to take the hit as insurance to cover up for all kinds of other crimes that were on their way to Washington, D.C. Right? And then nobody wanted to really talk about any of the crime involved with or among the appointment of Ray LaHood to the Department of Transportation or anything that happened after that yet, right? Because we still got time. Because why? What do we got on our agenda now? Well, we've got the DOD travel program through Citigroup, right? When did that happen? How did that get set up? It's not at all a conflict of interest in having it set into effect or set into motion during a time frame when, I don't know, very important State Department activities were reprogramming things that should have been under the purview of one department but were allowed to be put under their purview? No, it has nothing to do with that, right? How about free transportation for children and youth? How about free transportation for youth? Anybody remember those programs? And you know, what's ironic is when you actually do a media report and you interview somebody that's involved in a specific kind of political project that has specific local political organizing effort going on, and then that person later becomes a celebrity, and all of a sudden you can't find that article anymore. Yeah, it fits a pattern, unfortunately. Comparable to patterns connected to what happened on April 4th of 2017 in Houston that had a direct impact on April 24th of 2000, I'm sorry, April 4th of 2018 in Houston. It had a direct impact on April 24th, 2018 in Dallas, right? Because those kinds of things really should have been addressed forthwith before we got to the point we are now. Because now we have to deal with that 5 spot on those mayors in Mexico, which correlate with at least 5, sometimes 6 options, all under the same number that have only one thing distinguishing them, right? At least for the last several years in the state of Texas. The only thing that distinguished which option you got under that legal code was the mode of transportation. But now, thanks to what presumably the federal government just put forth, now you have very specific correlating metrics to coordinate with your cross-border transportation. That didn't exist in the last several years while they were trying to test schemes associated with modes of transportation used in cross-border traffic. I mean, at some point in time, we're going to have to talk about, well, what is really going on with requirements concerning the kind of background check one has to obtain in order to qualify for a transportation workers identification credential card. What do you really need one of those for? Especially in so far as you also have to consider the licensing one gets for the vehicle. And then at some point in time, you have to deal with the fact that every vehicle license has a contract number. Who gets the information on those contract numbers? This is a lot of information that when you've spent several years refusing to actually address criminal charges associated with manipulation of transportation and transportation infrastructure, well, you end up having a lot more of a liability than you have as a foundation for any sort of infrastructure obligation that you could be setting up. Those things should already have been secured and taken care of. If you thought that all you had to deal with is figuring out how to pay off those insurance claims on those planes that flew into the Twin Towers in the Pentagon and also went down in a meadow en route, right? Because that paradigm keeps repeating over and over again. And what we haven't gotten to is misrepresenting that people were have, in the course of receiving medical treatment, while they were being cybernetically engaged in processes associated not only with finance but with transportation, including maritime transportation, air traffic safety, right? All these things are still outstanding. So it's one of those things where you're like, you know what, I might like to invest, but I can't invest. I can't invest. No one did their due diligence. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to pay for too many people's parking tickets. And I'm going to have to pay too many kickbacks to people that engaged in illegal towage during a state of emergency, but figured they'd make it a workers' comp claim to see if they could flip the bid. And because they were successful, anticipate that they're going to be able to keep doing that for how many years? In how many states? State marketplace competition. See, now you've taken the argument around a criminal enterprise associated with a federal piece of legislation speculating on state models regarding alleged competition and establishing their own marketplaces. And now you've put it into a completely different realm, right? And the risk associated with transportation safety literally qualify when it comes to laws regarding domestic and international terrorism. Yes, they do. And so that default from April looks a lot more suspicious, right? Because what happens on October 24th? What happens on October 24th of 2021? Yeah, you had to deal with all of those other matters first before you even tried to do this. Who was the intellectual author? Who created the structure? Who created the format? Who created the outline? Who did the lobbying? You see, these are the very, very real details we're going to have to be dealing with. Did somebody backdate information to reflect that activities occurred on the level of the Congress in the past week that did not actually literally occur in the specific time space definition of legislative process they're trying to reflect right now as of 2:28 p.m. on August 14th, 2021? Did you backdate the information to make it look like what? What did you do last night? Because I saw what you did last night, right? And unfortunately, it looks like you just spent the last 20 years torturing people so that you could literally cover your ass for being terrorist by giving a big, 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 big kickback to people you bribed to pretend to be terrorists, right? They're not really terrorists because at some point, based on what you just set up, you're going to have to deal with them as legitimate heads of state. You're going to have to deal with them as legitimate civil infrastructure. You're going to have to deal with them as legitimate business leaders. You're going to have to deal with them as legitimate educators. And you just spent 20 fucking years using them in one of the most illegal loan programs in order to cover up for your own crime. You used them as insurance to cover up for your acts of terrorism, and then you defaulted on it. And now you want to borrow on who? I may be incorrect. You may have just made an error, right? This is hacking. It didn't really happen. Somebody hacked the entire federal system. So right now it reflects that you've spent the last month trying to bribe people after you've been loaning out their children to hook up one of the most disgusting deals I've ever seen. It didn't really happen, right? And you're going to correct the error on the record by Monday morning, right? Thank you so much.